Hello, everyone, and welcome to One Kill Per Podcast, episode 316? Yeah, that sounds right. My name's Benjamin Yoder. I'm here today to talk to you about video games, and we got a hefty episode this week. First, we're going to talk about Halo 4. I played through all Halo 4. And then we got a ton of news. Not only the Nintendo Direct stuff, but also a bunch of other things. So I do want to say, per usual, I'm going to put the Nintendo Direct stuff at the end, because I assume if you're listening to this podcast in real time, you've been hearing Nintendo Direct stuff all week on your podcast. So I try to make it so you can skip that if you want, but per usual, we will focus on the things that I think are most important, which means usually stuff that is not actually the big news stories for most outlets to talk about. And then we also have some talk about some Little Dragon Quest Champions ranking thing, as well as there's an interesting event where Square Enix, Sega, and Konami talked about like their NFT stuff, which, if you don't care about NFTs, it's perfectly all good and fine. But, we always ask the question of like, why are these companies investing? And, I have my feelings about why each one does, but it offered some kind of interesting insight into like what their thoughts are behind, either operating in that space or not operating in that space to some extent. So we'll be talking about all those things. Big, chunky episodes. We will be skipping Jillian's Corner this week, though, because there's just a lot going on this week. So, sorry, Jillian, I gypped you this week. But next week, I'm sure, assuming there isn't some explosive set of news coming out, but I highly doubt it. So, anyways, first and foremost, Halo 4. I went ahead and played through that with a bunch of friends of mine. We played through 4-player co-op on Legendary per usual. So that's still ongoing thing, although it is the last game in the Halo Master Chief Collection. So I think it'll be the only one we play for a while now. But yeah, this is the first Halo game that the original developer Bungie wasn't on board for, or at least first mainline Halo game. I know there's like some weird stuff. I think like ODST might have been like another team or something like that. But anyways, and one thing I do want to like take away like just immediately is that this is a great looking like late era Xbox 360 game. It's hard to remember that that's not an Xbox One game at times. So, but it is a very safe game overall. So it's a very traditional Halo gameplay. With like heavy amounts of the usual kind of Halo, I guess you could say maybe dated, but of the era type of shooter where, there's a pretty limited amount of ammo in each gun and you have to do a lot of gun swapping on the fly. And then the enemies are also fairly durable. Like I said earlier, we're playing on Legendary, so that could play a role in that. But, the bigger thing is that like, in Halo games, you have to, get rid of an enemy's shield most of the time before you can actually like, shoot them. And then headshots at that point generally become a lot more effective. So you kind of have to like dig through a player's shield first and foremost. Although some of the enemies in this game felt like they had a little bit more resistant shields than usual. I don't know if I was just doing something wrong, but sometimes it felt like we could just load tons and tons of bullets into an enemy and their shield just would not come down. It's like this new race of enemies in the game that kind of, the big like grunt, I don't know, grunt, would that be the big one? Like brute, maybe brute's probably the better word, type of enemies. They just like were huge bullet sponges. So other than that though, gameplay wise, fairly standard game. So what we're looking at probably more uniquely in Halo 4 is, honestly the story, because this story is basically about how, Halo, I almost said Halo, I was trying to say John and I said Halo. It's a story just basically about how like John and Cortana are in a lot of ways like isolated from like the military group that they've been fighting for, because Cortana, his like AI companion, is slowly becoming corrupt. So like throughout the game, she's steadily getting worse and worse, more and more like irritable and things like that. And so what this does really is it adds like a personal and like very human stakes for Master Chief John himself, right? And Cortana, despite not being a human, is definitely portrayed as a human in a lot of ways. So she is a part of that. So it's in some ways it's about, the relationship between those characters and also how, Cortana's inevitable fate of basically being decommissioned in a lot of ways, ultimately is going to strain his relationship with whatever the military is that he's connected with. I will say, I have very slowly played through the Halo games. Like I played through Halo 1 when it came out, Halo 2 when it came out, and then only recently in the last few years played Halo 3. So like I haven't been like following the story in a very direct lineage that some people might be. Like, I don't even remember what like a Forerunner is, but a Forerunner is like an important thing in this story. It's like a race of people that are like, I guess like maybe like the ancestors to humans. I don't really know. Anyways, but that kind of story stuff is like a part of this game. I just don't think it's like really important for the most part. And unfortunately, a lot of the like big lore stuff in this game and co-op mode is kind of locked off where only one player can watch the cutscene, which really stunk. But I think generally that stuff doesn't really matter to me as much. I prefer the smaller, more human stories in Halo. I just don't think that Cortana and John's or Master Chief story is that particularly interesting to me. With Master Chief, like, he's somebody who his silence and I guess like in some ways in this game his defiance against orders kind of says more than what he could ever say in words, but it also doesn't necessarily make him like an interesting character. It's just you can read what's going through Master Chief's head by him not saying anything a lot of the times. And I think that's like an interesting thing about his character, but I don't think it's like something that's like it's not very deep. It feels like every time he's like just quiet, you kind of get the same read off of him. But it is an interesting question of how we basically take what is a fairly silent character and make them like a character that you can sympathize with and things like that. And Cortana as a character is a lot more vocal in this game. She's the one going through most of the actual trauma, I guess you could say. But she's not a character I care about either that much. So seeing her like fall apart doesn't do much for me. I definitely prefer the smaller stories of like Halo ODST and to some extent even Halo Reach as well with like the individual team members. But I think the problem is with Halo, or I keep calling him Halo instead of John. I don't know why. The problem with John and Cortana is that they've just been these long established characters, and so trying to turn them into like something that's more than what they were, I think is a really challenging thing to do. And for me, I just have never really had feelings for those characters in the first place. What I would have really liked to see more, honestly, with like Cortana falling apart is having that be more of a gameplay element of this game. So I think a little bit about like how Far Cry 4 has like drugs like a big theme to it, and so there's like these drug trip things where you play the game, and when you get on drugs, essentially that changes like how the game looks and I think plays. I have not played Far Cry 4. This is all just like me like absorbing that from the outside. It's like I kind of like that, and so I kind of was hoping, I guess maybe to some extent, that Halo 4 would play with the idea that like Cortana is in Master Chief's suit, right? And because she's getting corrupted, like what could that do to Master Chief to like make the game feel more interesting in different ways? Whether that be, change how he controls or maybe changes how he views the world and things like that. But it just doesn't really do anything like that. And admittedly, I don't think you should really have I should have really expected that in the first place. This game being, 343's first Halo game, probably more than anything was just about making sure they made a good Halo game. I mean, literally the game ends with them like a screen saying like, "Thank you for trusting us with the Halo franchise. We know you guys love it so much." It's something that I think just making a solid one of these made a lot of sense in terms of just like what the goals of this game's development were. But I kind of wish I saw more of that in a way that like the player was impacted in more direct ways as a gameplay kind of thing. But overall, I think this is like an overall okay Halo game, which from what I hear is maybe like how 343 games have been in general, just like overall okay Halo games. But I probably would never have played this game without co-op being like a factor here. And I think it's like a fun way to kill like 2 or 3 nights with your friends. And I think maybe the one thing I would say with the co-op stuff is like, I would like to see things like the legendary mode feel a bit more balanced in co-op. It's definitely better balanced in terms of respawning with partners versus like Halo Reach. Halo Reach, you would respawn like nonstop. And in the case of Halo 4, it feels like you are respawning a lot more, a lot less often, but it's still like consistent enough where you constantly feel like engaged with the game and not waiting long periods of time for you to come back kind of thing. But maybe like the bigger thing with like legendary mode in general is I wish that the short range guns felt more effective, because those are kind of the majority of the guns in the Halo universe, I feel like, but they become very difficult to use in legendary versus like long range sniper weapons, I feel like. And so you pick up an assault rifle and you're just like, I don't really want to use use this gun. I mean, it's fine. It just doesn't feel very impactful to use. Like, you can definitely get enemies from afar, but it feels like you're just burning an entire clip trying to take down an enemy if you're like anywhere further than like 10 feet away from them. So I kind of wish there's a little bit more gun balance for legendary mode in specific. But, unfortunately, I probably won't play Halo 5, maybe ever, because it's an Xbox One only game. So if it comes to PC, maybe we'll play it like co-op on there. And Halo Infinite we might check out, but we're kind of waiting for that to get cheap enough at this point. But Halo 4, I think it was a pretty solid, okay video game. I think that's maybe the best thing I could say about it. But I think it's like really well made overall, which was probably, for the time, very important that it was that. So anyways, just my little Halo 4 thoughts. We're going to shift over to news. Again, we're going to skip Jillian's Corner again this week, but thank you again, Jillian, for supporting us on the Ko-fi channel. A little quick correction. I don't know if this is actually a correction because I don't remember if I ever claimed this on the podcast, but this is something that I thought was true, but was actually not. With Sonic Superstars, the multiplayer in Sonic Superstars is local only, not online, which is very disappointing for me as somebody who doesn't play video games locally with people very often. So I will not be playing that game probably, unfortunately, because that was the thing that was most interesting to me. The rest of it, I could probably do without. I mean, like, it looks good. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that, like, oh, it's a bad Sonic game. It's just that was the part of the puzzle there that I was interested in. And without that, I just don't really have any interest. So maybe they patch in some online multiplayer later. I'll be into it. But for now, I don't think that will be something I care about. So, but yeah, I wasn't sure if I gave the impression that it would be online in the past. So I just want to make sure that I updated you guys in that regard. A couple of news stories here, maybe more business news stories here up front. Dragon Quest Champions, came out a week or so ago. And so one thing I've been doing actually more recently is spending more time looking at Japanese mobile game revenue charts, which basically is just like, shows, I think it's like the top 50 games is what 4Gamer posts. I don't know who the actual source is actually, but 4Gamer is where I've been reading these stories. And so they showed Dragon Quest Champions actually made the top 50 that week. I don't know. I've just recently started doing this, so I'm not sure what new games typically chart at when they come out. But it did beat out games like Art Knights, Idolmaster, Cinderella Girls, and then Heaven's Burn Red, which are, older games, but they are established games at this point. They did not give any numbers for Dragon Quest Champions in terms of revenue or anything like that. So at this point, it's just kind of wait and see how things go, week by week. But it did actually chart on that list, which is cool. So I don't know if that is actually mean success or anything like that. I will say Heaven's Burn Red, I don't know what happened this last week, but it was at 20 the week before and is now at 50. So I'm not sure what happened there, or if that's just like a very normal thing with those kind of charts. Again, I've only recently started following this list, and Dragon Quest Champions is maybe the first game I'm going to look at and really pay attention to see where it's ranking at. Because if it falls off that list, I really want to know that it falls off that list. So, but that was kind of interesting to see that it actually got up there. So I'll be curious to see if it sticks on. If you don't know, like Dragon Quest Walk is like super high on that list, like above Pokemon Go. So it's fascinating to see like what in Japan ranks as high as it does for that. As mentioned at the start, Square Enix, Sega, and Konami, they attended a NFT event. I don't know what the event was. Maybe I didn't write down the name, but I was reading on a summary of the interview from 4Gamer. And a couple things came up. Each company kind of had their own thing to say about it. Sega, I don't think Sega had said this before. At least I don't remember if they said this, or maybe they said it and kind of walked it back. But according to this most recent interview, their super game they're talking about, they do want to have ties in with blockchain still, and they said that this is still part of the plan. So that super game aspect will potentially include aspects of blockchain stuff and NFTs. It's hard to say what that really means because at this point, nobody has really done a successful NFT blockchain game, or at least there hasn't been any kind of like major success. I mean, there's definitely games that are profitable, but I would not say that they have shown what these platforms can do to help games themselves. But Square Enix talked about their specific goal and basically said their current goal is basically mass adoption. So they're not really looking at profit at this point. They're just trying to get people into the market. And so they're talking about, getting people to invest even just like 1 to 5 yen just to get them on the chain and understanding like what it is kind of thing. If you don't remember, Million Arthur, the latest game they put out for that is a NFT game. And as far as I understand, that game does not actually require NFTs. And part of me was like, well, I wonder like what the point is of making an NFT game is at that point. But I'm going to guess probably it's just more of an onboarding process to some extent of like, hey, if you're interested in this game, get it on now, and then we'll kind of try to get you to get NFTs after that kind of thing, right? So Square Enix, I mean, I don't think that's anything off like of what we already know about Square Enix and Sega. I think they have mentioned the Super game being blockchain related in the past, but they're kind of reiterating it. I think this is the first time they've talked about it since, the whole NFT and blockchain market kind of went up, right? And then the last thing was Konami, which is probably the most interesting out of all these, because basically all they said, and I don't know why they're at this event, I don't know if Konami has any active blockchain stuff, but basically it sounded like they have not really done anything since the Konami or Castlevania NFT sale thing that they did. And they mentioned the fact that in North America, the response was incredibly negative, and like they kind of basically took a step back after that. And especially with like, the fact that the market has turned and basically we're in a wait and see approach before kind of investing further. The moderator, who is not associated with these companies, as far as I can tell, but, was definitely like, in the NFT market. So he's definitely like, pumping that stuff. Did mention that he was like, hey, the Momotaro Densetsu and winning 11 brands like looked very promising. And Konami was like, oh yeah, that's interesting. But, we're still just kind of waiting and seeing at this point. So Konami, as much as people don't like Konami at times, it seems like maybe they're the ones taking the most like unproactive approach to one of the most hated, like, I don't know if like what you would call this, technologies of the gaming space right now. I don't know if that's the way you would put it, but I just thought that was interesting. One other thing, Sega did say that they're going to focus on Asia first. And, I think generally it seems like Japan is not as aggressive towards, NFTs and blockchains. So I think that makes a lot of sense probably for them, because right now I think there's a big, like, in some ways kind of video game crash of the in North America with NFTs and stuff like that, where like I don't think the majority of people are interested in getting to NFTs at this point. But Sega did say that they are seeing that the market was continuing to grow in Asia specifically. So just interesting to hear these more direct pieces of talk about NFT stuff through these companies. Obviously, Square Enix, Sega, or Square Enix specifically has been making a lot of moves in that space. But they invested a bunch of money in that stuff, so it kind of makes sense that they're going to continue to work on that stuff until they basically decide that any amount of money they're putting in at this point would just continue to be lost money. But until they get to the point where they make that determination, I think they'll continue to, make relatively low bets on this stuff, right? Like the Million Arthur game does not look like it took a lot of money to make. It is an idle RPG, which again, the thing I would say about that is like I don't want to sit there and disparage idle RPGs. There are non-NFT idle RPGs that people like. So I'm not going to sit there and say that, Million Arthur as a game isn't valuable as an idle RPG. But it does seem like maybe it's not really catching on the way that, I don't know if anyone was hoping per se, but it's not really catching on, it seems like. But I could be wrong. I don't know. I did not see it on that list of mobile games, if I recall correctly, mobile game revenue stuff. So I don't think it's like reaching any kind of mainstream success at the moment. Actual video game stuff that's not just business talk. This is actually old. This game's actually out, but I just had no idea it existed. Magical Drop 6 apparently came out. And I will be honest with you, I know very little about Magical Drop. The things I know about Magical Drop, there's a little clown at the bottom of the screen. He throws the orbs up. And then on internet forums throughout the 90s and early 2000s, everyone had the gif of the lady in like the, wrapped up like cloth and like her bouncing up and down and her boobs jiggling. That's all I know about the Magical Drop series. So it was interesting to see because like I don't know anything about the series, but they have like a story mode in there. It doesn't look particularly good. Or at least particularly interesting, I should say. Like, it just kind of looks like character portraits and text, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but like, it just didn't look like it was be very engaging. And it has like kind of like a Mario Party looking mode that in the trailer had only computer players, I think, but I think the intention is you could play like with 4 people. I didn't really fully understand that. Again, this video game is out, so you may know. So if you know anything about Magical Drop 6, let me know. I don't know anything about Magical Drop 6, but it kind of caught my eye just because I did not know they made a new Magical Drop game. And it looked pretty good overall. I don't think I'll get to it just because I have a lot of those kind of games sitting around on my shelves that I need to play still. But I was just surprised to see that out. And cool. I don't know when Magical Drop 5 came out, but I feel like it's been a long time. So this is before the Nintendo Direct, although it is a Nintendo-specific thing. Baten Kaitos 1 and 2 HD collection. They announced that I believe the Japan and Asia release is September 14th. I do not think they gave a US or UK release or European release yet. And I also could be wrong, but I think the US still doesn't have a physical announced yet, where the UK, they're selling it exclusively through Game, the retailer. But the collector's edition for, I believe, Japan has like these little cards. So if you don't know, the Baten Kaitos games are card games, and so the cards have character portraits and stuff on it. And I thought that was really cute. No Tower of Jiraga special edition included. If you don't know, the Baten Kaitos, the original one, I believe, when you pre-ordered it in Japan, you got a copy of Tower of Jiraga. It's the NES port to a GameCube disc, and it's just a disc with just the NES version Tower Jiraga on it, and like a manual and everything. So way too produced for probably what that should be. But otherwise just like some special packaging and art. I don't really go for collector's editions very often, so I don't think I have any real interest in that kind of thing. But I'm still waiting to see what the US release looks like. Also, I don't know if like PlayAsia has any information on this, of like whether the Asian release has English on it or not yet. But in the trailer, they did show the Japanese dub in action. And so if you don't know, Baten Kaitos has this weird echoey effect to its voice acting. And at the time, for a long time, I thought this was like just a bad recording job, basically. And I assumed it was just the English dub. But no, this is apparently like an effect they were going for with the game. It sounds, my friend when I was a lot younger used to say it sounds like everybody has boxes on their head when they're doing their voice acting. Just very echoey kind of thing. And no, they're keeping that aesthetic. I thought maybe like they wanted to remove that, and that's why they were only doing a Japanese voice track, maybe, because they only had like the source files for those. But nope, they're keeping that original boxy sound voice. I don't know if there's a way to turn that off or not. In the original game, there definitely wasn't, but we'll see. I'm going to guess probably they don't have the original files, though. So if they're reusing that voice acting, I'm guessing they're just pulling whatever was already on those discs. So that really probably means like my initial theory about, the dub, not being on there, being more of like a possible technical kind of thing could have been a thing, but no, it's probably just more of a legal money thing, with, just not wanting to pay the actors, or, not trying, like, not the time it would take to navigate that legal process just isn't worth it kind of thing. So a little bit of a shame, but, the voice acting for Baten Kaitos, I would say, is okay at best, if not maybe a little worse than expected. So, but I think it's fine. It is about right for a, shortly after 2000s era of voice acting. I'm playing Arkwright's Fantasia right now, and that was like a 2010 game, and that still has like worse voice acting than Baten Kaitos. So anyways, for the English dub, I should say. So, but I think most people are okay with Japanese dubs at this point. They don't really care about our Japanese language options at this point. I don't think they really care. That game is mostly text, boxes anyways. So you're going to read all of it anyways with that stuff. So, but yeah, still waiting for that English or US physical announcement. But yeah, I don't think the US or UK have an actual release date yet. But it's probably easy to assume that that's going to be, if not day and date, very, very close. So that's the end of our more standard news stories. Now we're getting into the more Nintendo Direct focused stuff. Some of these things may have been announced before, but they were in the Nintendo Direct, so I just kind of threw them all in here. Some of these are from the Japanese Direct, some of these are from the US Direct. But we're going to focus on the things that are things that I want to talk about myself, and we're not going to talk about, every little thing on this list. So, first and foremost, I just want to say, one thing I really appreciate about the Nintendo Direct overall is that it was lots of gameplay. I hate to like hit on this point so much, but like one of the frustrating things with like Sony and Microsoft's events were just not enough gameplay. And I feel like that's true most years. And, I think that's one thing that I do appreciate about Nintendo. But, I've been a longtime Nintendo fan, so I think overall, it makes sense that Nintendo Directs overall are more appealing to me personally. So, and a lot of I think the modern kind of like AAA space of games, I'm not going to say most of it doesn't appeal to me, but I don't have a lot that like interests me for the most part. A lot of games more or less look like the same third-person action games. I'm sure they're all different and unique, and I've played them and I enjoy them as well, right? I played Ghost of Tsushima multiplayer at the very least, right? So like I've played some of those games and I can enjoy them. It's not a problem, but they just don't really stand out to me a lot of the time. So anyways, Fashion Dream disclaimer. This is the, I believe Xseed's publishing this in the US. I could be wrong. Is the marvelous fashion game that is kind of the spiritual successor to Style Savvy. That got a November 2nd release date in Japan, but as far as I could tell, has not been announced for release with the release date in any other region, but it has been announced for localization. I think we may have known this before. I don't know for sure. I don't think I talked about it on this show though. It does let you play as men as well, so you can make your character a male, which that's cool. I mean, I think Style Savvy may have done that at some point as well, but I still think it's cool that they're allowing that. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be, have the attention that the lady characters get, right, when it comes to outfits and clothing. And like, unfortunately, just the fashion industry in general kind of has a built-in bias towards women in terms of outfits and stuff like that. So it's like the types of outfits and things like that. It's just hard to get diversity of clothes for men. So it's a lot harder to do something interesting, I feel like, with that stuff. So we'll see how that all goes though. They announced a new Princess Peach game, maybe in kind of the vein of like a Super Princess Peach, where she's kind of the main protagonist. What game it reminds me most of actually is Disney Princess Enchanted Journey, because it takes place on this stage and she's like running around and kind of like spinning around with like this magical stuff to interact with different things on the stage and things like that. And like, Disney Princess Enchanted Journey actually has this like very diorama-like world, and you go around and like, cast magic on things to like make them do things in the world and things like that. So Disney Princess Enchanted Journey was a game that definitely felt a little incomplete. There is like a sequel that I would like to play at some point, but I would expect that like Princess Peach would probably have a bit more of like a solid foundation behind it in terms of gameplay. So it's interesting to see. It seems like there might be some dress changing stuff as well, so that looks pretty cute. The Japanese Direct had a new version of Game of Life. So I took this as an opportunity to finally explore the Japanese path of Game of Life games. So if you don't know, when we did a Wii commercial video a long time ago, there was a trailer for the Game of Life, which, literally the board game, the Game of Life for the Wii. But the aesthetics of it were very Japanese. And when I say that, I don't mean in the sense of like, oh, it's like feudal Japan looking. It's like, it's just very cute, very, very like colorful characters and things like that. And if you look at the Game of Life games that came out in the US, they're more of like themed after the board game itself. The characters are just kind of like these flat shaded, game pieces and things like that. And so, like, I could be wrong, but it seems like there is a split in Game of Life games between, Japan and the US. I don't know if these games are like have any shared assets or anything like that, but it seems like there's a split. And these Game of Life games in Japan have been coming out since, as far as I can tell, the Famicom era. So I looked into this a bit. So I'm aware of a Famicom game, a Super Nintendo game, a Nintendo 64 game, a Wii game, and then this Switch one that got announced as well. So as far as I'm probably aware, I would assume it's just a video game version of the board game. It's just the aesthetics are different overall. It has a very like kind of the characters always kind of remind me of like Dragon Quest builders, just like those kind of short, stubby, Dragon Quest kind of looking characters. It's not Toriyama or anything like that, but it just reminds me of that a little bit. So it was cool to kind of like take some time to look into that and try to better understand, what these games are. I don't necessarily know why there's this separation between regions, if it's just simply we want to make a game that's more marketable to the West, or if there's actually some licensing stuff that like prevents them from, kind of intermingling these games between different regions and things like that. But Takara Tomy is the one who is the publisher of this game, I believe, in Japan as well. And I don't know if that's always been true, but for the Switch one at the very least. I love the main, like the key art for this game has a girl that's like kind of one of the hosts, I guess you could say. And she has a dress, and the dress is themed after the color wheel of the, I don't know, is it like a dial kind of thing in Game of Life? I think it's like a spinner of like what you spin to get a number. I don't know how, I've never played Game of Life, but it's like themed after that, and the character's like super, super cute. So I don't know. I was looking for the Wii version of Game of Life because that was the one that I first learned about. I've seen the Nintendo 64 version as well, like physically in person, but I was looking for the Wii one, but it was actually surprisingly expensive. I saw that there were very popular YouTube videos about the Wii one, so that maybe is part of it. Like Ogen no Kizuna, after that got a very popular YouTube video in Japan, the price of that shot up like crazy. So this, I think it might be a similar situation like this, where there's a very big Game of Life video on the Wii, and that drove up the demand for it. So I don't know how I want to get into this series yet. I'm interested, but I do need to I don't know how the Game of Life plays, so I think I will do a little bit of research in that regard and see if I can find what would make the most sense. The Switch one looks cute enough, and I guess I don't really know a reason why I would go back to an older one at this point, because they all seem to carry very similar aesthetics. Maybe the Wii one specifically, just because I'm a fan of the Wii, but I don't know anything specifically about Game of Life on the Wii that interests me. I don't think the Wii adds anything to that game in any way, as far as I can tell. But also with the price being as high as it is, I'll probably just have to pirate it at this point. Well, I don't remember the price exactly. I remember just looking at it and being like, this is higher than I would like. I don't want to say that's exorbitantly expensive. It could have been $30 and I was like, I'm not paying $30. I just remember it being higher than I wanted to pay. So anyway, so that was pretty cool to see. Dragon Quest Monsters, The Dark Prince, which... Princess or Prince? I don't know if it's Princess or Prince. I'm going to guess Prince, but my text here says Princess. I'm guessing I'm wrong here. But it was mentioned as Dragon Quest Monsters 3 in Japan, where it dropped the 3 in the US. I like the look of it. If you don't know, this is kind of the Pokemon spin-off of the Dragon Quest Monsters franchise. I think the thing that I was most interested in is just seeing how it stacks up to Pokemon, because, we're in this weird era of Pokemon where I think a lot of Pokemon fans are incredibly unhappy with the state of Pokemon and visually how those games look and things like that. And I would say Dragon Quest Monsters as the game looks consistent with what I expect out of a Pokemon game at this point. So I would not say it doesn't feel like a Yokai Watch situation where Yokai Watch on the 3DS looks significantly better than the Pokemon games, I think. I think personally for myself at this point, I'm still most interested in Yokai Watch 4 over any other Pokemon style game on the Switch at the very least. But at the very least, it's good to see this game coming over. It's a little surprising not seeing Dragon Quest X Offline make it over, and this does make it over. But I guess at the same time, that game maybe doesn't make as big of an impact, right? Dragon Quest X Offline is this weird chibi version of Dragon Quest X, almost like Final Fantasy 15 Pocket Edition in a lot of ways. And so maybe it just doesn't feel as marketable as a behind the back, fully open world looking kind of Dragon Quest game. I don't know if that's actually what it is, but that's what the impression I got from it. So I think it's Switch only and it's coming out in December. So that was pretty quick turnaround time because they just announced this game maybe a month ago, but they only had a key art. I don't even think it was key art. I think it just said Dragon Quest Monsters, and that was it. So yeah. Not a ton to say about this, but Uma Musume Pretty Derby Hot Blooded Chaos Festival. This is a Uma Musume, which if you don't know is a popular mobile game with girls who represent horses and they do horse racing. It is a party collection as far as I can tell. I don't really care about the party stuff in it so much, but what did interest me was what looks like a race mode where you kind of go through different areas and kind of it's not just a horse track. It's these very diverse areas you kind of go through, through buildings and things like that you race. The problem I can see so far is it looks like it's probably a single screen racing game. And I really struggle with single screen racing games because it feels like you never can get ahead enough to be in a position where you feel good about yourself. So a lot of times it feels like you're very restricted in where you can move and how you can play those games. I think there's some value in that, especially for a player who's going to be in last place so they can, kind of more easily catch up. But there's just something about it that I think is hard for me to kind of appreciate with those kind of games. I think of what are they called? There's these little micro machines. There's micro machine games that have very similar kind of approach, and I struggle with those games a little bit. And then maybe the last game that I really have any strong feelings on is just Super Mario Wonder, which is maybe a little weird for me to be 2D Super Mario game. That's something I care about somewhat. I don't want to sit there and say I was oh my god with this game or anything like that, but it caught my eye. Visually I think it looks really interesting. It reminds me of an Ubisoft game more than anything, honestly. But I like that it seems like the characters feel like they're diverse characters, and it feels like they might have their own skill sets. I don't know for sure, but that just is kind of the vibe I got from the trailer. And I'm curious if the multiplayer is online. Super Mario Maker 2 has online multiplayer, if you did not know, as well as the most recent 3D Land or 3D World port has online multiplayer too, so I'm hoping that will be a consistent of the series going forward. There's also a scene where like 3 characters are jumping around an area and Peach kind of comes in off screen very late out of a warp pipe, so that makes me think that maybe she was in like an online mode, she was off screen going through a warp pipe, but I don't know. It's hard to say. And then it just seems like the powers are going to be, fairly unique powers this time, hopefully. So I'm hoping this is going to be a very fresh feeling Mario game. I feel like New Super Mario Brothers as a franchise feels very heavily built off like the foundation of, I think the game I always compare it most to is like Super Mario Brothers 3. There's a lot of things Super Mario Brothers 3 has that New Super Mario Brothers doesn't, but like that's the foundation I feel like New Super Mario Brothers has been built off of, and every New Super Mario Brothers game feels like it's been focused on that foundation for a very, very, very long time. So I'm really hopeful that this game will kind of break that trend and create something that feels fairly unique at the very least. So I think that's like coming out October this year. We'll see if I actually get around to playing it. It's kind of like Tears of the Kingdom, where there's a very good chance I'll not actually pick it up, just depending on timing and stuff like that. But it is the first time I've been interested in a 2D Mario game in a very, very, very long time. Maybe since the original New Super Mario Brothers, honestly. Like, I like Super Mario World, don't get me wrong, but when I played that game, I was not expecting much at all. I really did not have any anticipation for that being a good game. Or I don't want to say good game. A game that I enjoyed. I did not really expect it to be a game that I enjoyed. So that is something that I haven't felt in a very long time with a 2D Mario game. So a couple of smaller games here that I just kind of want to bring up because they looked interesting, but they're things that I'm probably going to skip out on just because there's other things I'd rather play in this style that I just haven't gotten to yet. The Fate series has a new like samurai game, like I think it's called Fate Samurai Remnant or something like that. I don't know if the Fate Samurai thing is an ongoing thing or if this is a new thing or whatever, but it is kind of cool because it looks like it is a fairly open world samurai game in the way that maybe like Way of the Samurai was, or like, a Yakuza game is in some ways. My friend actually recently showed me like one of the PSP Way of the Samurai games recently, and that was interesting to watch. But I think ultimately for myself though, as much as I like the look of this game, I think it's on like pretty much everything except for Xbox. I just kind of feel like I would rather go play Kengo at this point. And the original Kengo that I have is pretty limited overall. There's things I like about that. But later Kengo games have open world. And since I have some connection to Genki as a developer, I think that's going to push me in the Kengo direction more than any of these other games, unfortunately. So I don't think I'll get to check it out, but it is cool. I always love seeing anime games that are not arena fighters. So that's always a bonus for me. There's a Goemon successor. I think it's called like Otogi Katsugeki Mameda no Bakurero Oracle Saitoro no Sainen. I have a full name here, I guess. Supposedly this is a Goemon successor, Mystical Ninja Goemon successor. It looks neat, and it very much looks like a Goemon game, but because it very much looks like a Goemon game, that kind of is just a reminder that I need to play more Goemon games because I have not played a single one through still. So that's something I do need to do. The 64 one is probably the most appealing to me, but the PS2 one, with the translation finally being out, is something I really need to get around to as well. Kobe worked on that game, but I don't know who the people were who worked on it. I don't know if somebody got the credits listed for that. I think I may have looked in the credits and maybe like the people who worked on Castlevania 64 were not particularly involved in that game, but I could be wrong. I need to go back and look at it. So there's a couple games that I don't have a lot of interest in, but I think I saw a lot of people kind of like poo-pooing a little bit. So I just want to say about it that I think sometimes more safe games can be not necessarily a bad thing, especially considering the position of a franchise. So the games I'm talking about here is Super Mario RPG Remake. I think the Mario RPG franchise has been a bit spotty lately. I think people like those games, don't get me wrong, but they just have not been the big hits that I feel like people want those games to be for a long time. So maybe going back to something that's a little bit more traditional. I'm not sure who's working on this, but I think it looks good overall. I saw some complaints about the visual style, but I think the visual style looks good overall myself. I think it looks updated, like has a good modern updated look to it. It maybe doesn't have that Silicon Graphics 3D kind of look to it per se, but I don't really like hold that stuff super close to my heart either. So I think Super Mario RPG is a fun game. I don't love it particularly though. I don't know if I love any Mario RPG game honestly. But I like them. Don't get me wrong, I enjoyed them. WarioWare Move It looks very much in line with like WarioWare Smooth Moves, but again, the WarioWare franchise, I think as a whole, has been kind of through some turbulent times, just trying to continue to find, why this franchise is relevant today. And I think people have been kind of iffy on a lot of that. But WarioWare Smooth Moves in general, I think, is a really solid game overall. And so building a game off the foundation of that, I think, is not a bad thing. And it seems like they're kind of putting in more of a focus on simultaneous multiplayer. So rather than having to hand the controller around and stuff, they seem to be like, hey, you all play the games at once kind of thing based off what I saw. So, but again, with those franchises, I think like, yeah, I would prefer to see something new, but at the same time, those franchises have been through so many kind of like bumps at this point. It probably is for the best. I think a lot of it, like how like I like Mighty Number 9, but I understand why a game like Mega Man 11 needs to exist because there's a lot of like fraught feelings about Mega Man as a whole. So doing something a bit safer is not necessarily a bad idea. And then finally, Star Ocean 2R, I think is what it's called. I don't remember the full name. It's the second story. I don't remember. The second Star Ocean game is getting a remake. I think it's kind of interesting because it takes like the HD 2D kind of look and kind of blows out the 3D aspect of it and makes it look more like a full 3D game, although the characters are still like the 2D sprites and things like that. I will say, in doing this, and I think this is true of a lot of HD 2D games, I don't think the character sprites blend well with the backgrounds, and so I think it looks odd to me. I don't think it's a bad look per se. I just don't think it looks great at times. I just think there's a lack of consistency between the character sprites and the world itself. And it's something I was thinking a lot about this week because I was looking at for the Twitter, I think I call them internally like Twitter bits, but I don't know what, like video game bits. I don't know. The Twitter posts I've been making about various random games. I did a one for Hardcore Uprising this week, Hardcore Uprising. And I think that game does a really good job of blending its 2D sprites with 3D graphics in the background. And I think a lot of it comes down to like lighting, color scheme of the character palettes, camera angle, and things like that, and just how that game generally moves. And I think that's something I don't see a lot out of games that use 2D character sprites and 3D backgrounds. I think there's almost always this feeling that these characters are out of place in those games. So Hardcore Uprising, I think, is something that does that really well. And, I wish I better understood how to like express that, because I do think that like it's something that if you just did the things I said out loud just now, I don't necessarily you'd think you'd get the same results as like a Hardcore Uprising. But I think a lot more games could do a better job of blending those aspects in the background and stuff. But I think Star Ocean R at least looks kind of cool overall. At the very least, it looks like a lot of effort was put into it. Visually. So I think that's pretty cool. But the first two Star Ocean games have gotten a lot of remakes, I feel like, recently. So I'm not really sure how excited people are for this, but given they keep getting remade, I guess they keep selling. So yeah. Anyways, that's going to be it for this week. Thank you so much for coming. OneControlBoard.com is the website. The Chase Jokers video went public on the One Control Board Plus channel. I think I'm renaming the One Control Board Plus channel back to Acolian's Box. If you don't know, that is my old blog name. And I just felt like, actually, that's a name that fits pretty well of what that channel should be, I think. I think the less seriously I take that channel, the better in a lot of ways. So I think that will be something that will happen. I got to figure out the rebranding for that, though. I'm not committing to that, but I think that's what's going to happen. But yeah, Chase Joker video is up if you want to learn about Konami's 3v3 arcade game. You should check it out. I think it's a really cool game that unfortunately is just really hard to get to and play if you are somebody who lives outside Japan. So yeah. Otherwise, I think that's going to be it for this week. Thanks again for coming. OneControlBoard.com is the website, and I hope you guys have a great week. Bye.